Thank you, John. Well, thank you, and I hope we'll have a lot of questions and interaction from the group. Good to be with you. So you notice that I put, these are lessons that we've learned. I see a lot of people that have been in a lot of these hours with me in the room, and those that we're still learning. I think it would be a real mistake to believe that we've got it figured out, as we always tell our clients. So what have we learned? What are some big things that we've learned in coaching? Well, leaders are actually lonely. Organizational leaders are lonely. Their family's tired of hearing their problems. They can't really talk to their employees. And the last thing they typically want is a business partner. And problems are common. There is nothing more discouraging than to tell somebody a problem and they look at you and I've never heard of that before. Wow, that's really strange. That's really different. But I remember hearing in my training, and it's true in a lot of things about life, we tend to get isolated, we tend to think we're unique, we tend to think that no one else can understand. If you have somebody look you in the eye with confidence and say, you know what, your problems are common, and there are actually solutions for that. That's encouraging. Solutions are custom, however. We don't have a program at Broad Insights. We're going to talk a lot about diagnosing before we prescribe. This is complex, and solutions really are unique, and they need to be customized, and people are unique. People are different. They bring different baggage, they bring different backgrounds, they bring different perspectives, and we've got to be sensitive to that as coaches. And our work is meaningful. It actually matters what we do. I absolutely love business coaching because I know we're making a difference in people's lives. And I love selling business coaching because I know what we've done for people. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So I've got two sections today, one on lessons for coaches. For those of you that are interested in coaching, would like to take the next step, and then we'll have a section on lessons we've learned from our clients. You know, we have had some coaches that have joined Broad Insights, and they've not actually fared very well. I remember being in Charleston, West Virginia one night with a bright young man, had quite a bit of experience, and I remember going to dinner with him. And he was having difficulty getting clients, and he was explaining all of his journey with this. And I said to him, you know, Eric, you actually believe something that isn't true. You believe that when somebody hires you as a business coach, they're doing you a favor. And actually, it's just the opposite. I have seen what business coaching does for people. When I go in and talk to somebody about business coaching, I'm not, wondering whether or not they're going to do me a favor. I know we can unleash the potential in them and their organization. So I got to change my mindset. I'm not actually bothering them. I'm not disrupting their life. I'm actually helping them move to the next level. You got to believe that as a business coach. That's a huge change. One of our coaches, Eric Knutson, who works very closely with us, was telling me one day about business coaching, and it's like multi-dimensional chess. This may look easy, and actually we have an approach that is relatively casual when we're talking to people about business coaching, but this is difficult. You've got situations where families get involved, multi-generations get involved, ownership is inequitable. You've got people that have differing skill sets than the previous generation. You've got tension that's going on. You've got personal lives going on. You've got issues with finance. You've got issues with manufacturing. You've got all of these myriad things. This is not checkers. It's not even chess. Business coaching is multi-dimensional chess. And that's why I love it. It's never the same. We work with about 200 different organizations. There is no model. The only model is listen before you speak. Prescribe or diagnose before you prescribe. That's the model. Multidimensional chess. This is a picture that actually is probably a little embarrassing for me. And that is with one of our coaches, Jeff Clemens, who works with us. And I took a picture with him after a round of golf. And I'm smiling. And Jeff is being a really good sport. I have just beaten Jeff. But you should ask the question, why would I take a picture after a simple round of golf? Well, that's a good question, because actually it's so rare that I beat Jeff that I took this picture. You know, one of my greatest goals in life is to beat Jeff Clemens consistently in golf, and I'm afraid it's not going to happen unless I get a coach. I played more golf last year than I've ever played in my life, and my handicap, which is a measure of what your scores typically are, is the exact same to 1/10 of a point as it was at the beginning of last year. During the year, the warmer weather, I got marginally better, but I didn't have a coach. I need a coach.
I'll coach you, Jeff.
Wonderful. I need it. Should I say I need a competent coach? Look, I'll take all the help I can get. You know, when we think about coaching, you really can't describe business coaching. Here's a mistake that coaches make. They try to explain what they do. If you meet someone and they want to find out what you do, you well-meaningly try to describe it. Don't do that. You cannot describe coaching. You've got to experience coaching. And so what we do whenever we meet someone who's potentially interested in coaching is we actually have a coaching session with them. Don't have anyone on your behalf explain what you do as a business coach. They're going to unwittingly mess it up. It cannot be described, it must be experienced, and every experience is different. I will sit with people, and every experience is unique. I remember an example where I had someone come to my office and they said, you know, Jim, I actually don't believe in business coaching. I'm wasting your time, I'm wasting my time, and I apologize for even coming to your office. And I said, you know, Roger, I love business. I love small business, and I'm curious. Let's talk. It's okay. Hey, if I could wave a magic wand and change one thing about your business, what would it be? He talked for 90 minutes. People are desperate to have someone who actually is interested in what they're doing. And you know what's interesting at the end of that? This happens to me a lot. They'll say, well, it's obvious you know what you're talking about. I had said almost nothing. People really want to have someone who actually has experience, and the way that you sell coaching and propose coaching to someone is have them experience it. We talk about 3 fundamental things that brought insights for coaching. Get clarity around your priorities. People don't have problems with ideas. Business owners think, well, you know, I've got all these ideas, I'm smart, and they are. The issue is not ideas, it's clarification of your priorities. Secondly, act sensibly. I remember when I first started coaching, and I see this with new coaches. We want to work so hard. It's well-meaning. We want to prove we're worth what they're paying us. And so what do? We want to load them down with homework. Look at all the things we've talked about. Here's all the things you can do. That's a way to get rid of a client very quickly. We're on a marathon, not a sprint. You can catalog the ideas you've talked about, and you should, but you really ought to act sensibly in a measured way, in a way that we can actually handle these. And thirdly, measure for accountability. Are we making progress? And what is the pace? Is the pace appropriate? Humility and curiosity. I don't learn when I'm talking. Coaches should not presume they know the answer. There is tremendous value in just being humble and being curious. I remember being in Orrville, Ohio, working with someone in the pork industry. And we had brought in a person from Chicago who was in commodities trading. I had never met this gentleman before, and he sat down at breakfast at the hotel, and we realized that we were both working for my client. And I looked at him and said, "Tell me about your journey." He said, "I presume you're not talking about my flight from Chicago last night." And I smiled. He told me everything about his life. People will tell you if they know you're genuinely interested in them. Do you really have curiosity about them? The humility to not presume you know, but to ask is very powerful as a coach. But we work so hard. We've got all this experience. We've got all this education, and we want to prove what we're worth. Actually, nobody cares what I know. No one really cares what I know. They don't know how many degrees I have. They don't really care. What they care is, does what I know meet a need that they have? Again, I don't demonstrate what I know by what I say. I demonstrate what I know by what I know to ask. Think about the best attorneys. Think about the best doctors. Think about the best business coaches. They have a tremendous wisdom based upon their experience. They know what should be asked. Now, we're not talking about interrogation. And there are a lot of people who think, well, I can learn rote questions. Great. Give me my list of 100 questions and I'm good to go. When I walk into a room, when you walk into a room, we've got 30, 35 years business experience, and you don't have a pre-programmed list. As a matter of fact, I never take notes in my first coaching session. I want to be locked in. And if I'm really listening, the questions are infinite. I'm actually asking a question based upon what I just heard. And my ability, my wisdom, my experience that allows me to bounce off that, dig deeper in ways I could never imagine or ever list, actually is a way that subconsciously in their mind is demonstrating, wow, this person actually knows what he's talking about. Quit trying to prove what you know by what you say, especially initially. Demonstrate your knowledge as a coach by what you know to ask. You know where the opportunities may be. You know where the pain points may be. Here's an approach that we try to take at Broad Insights. Can we listen 80% of the time and only talk 20% of the time? How can I really help you if I haven't heard something? How often do we men get in trouble with our wives because they want to talk with us about something and we want to solve something? Same thing with a client. And you know what's interesting? I love listening now. Whenever I go to lunch or dinner with a client, I am invariably the first one finished eating. It's become habitual with me. I'm not actually trying to do that. I love finding out what's going on. You think about a doctor, for instance. A doctor is always diagnosing. What would you think about having a doctor who had had a pharmaceutical salesman come in his office moments before you arrive, and he's trying to prescribe something to you before ever hearing? You know, what's a doctor always doing? They're getting blood work. They're getting a specimen sometimes. They're getting x-rays. They're getting MRIs. They're coming in with their instruments and they're doing the blood pressure work. They're looking in your ears. They're looking in your eyes. They're asking you questions. Hey, what brings you in today? They're always diagnosing. And they're probing further and further. This is what business coaches do. You cannot fake this. I don't like the expression at all. Fake it till you make it. You can't fake 35 years of business experience. Be careful about having someone who introduces you and says, look, I'm starting business coaching. This is going to be fun. We're going to figure this out together. I don't want somebody trying out business coaching on me. Diagnosing. Allow silence. John Denny, who heads up the PBCA, I remember that. He would often say things like, allow silence to do the heavy lifting. Silence is uncomfortable, but it's powerful. I will talk to people sometimes and I will ask them, where are you on life's journey? Powerful question. And let them think. We do not have to fill a void of silence. There's a proverb from the Old Testament that says a plan in the heart of man is like a deep well or deep water, but a man of understanding draws it out. How do you draw out what's in somebody's heart? You draw it out by questions. Very powerful if you become great at asking empathic, pointed questions. We're not talking about interrogation. We're not talking about making someone uncomfortable. What we're talking about is relieving a burden from people. One of the illustrations that I've often used in coaching is everyone has a backpack on. It's invisible, but it's filled with their challenges and their burdens. And an inexperienced and ineffective business coach or advisor is always saying, hey, have you read this book? Hey, have you done this? And they're actually unwittingly adding to the backpack, adding to the burden. And an effective business coach is saying, hey, what's in that backpack? Let's work on this together. Wise people are actually trying to find out what is deep in going on in that business leader's life. Our foundations for our sessions, there's just such an important focus on being self-forgetful, having a dialogue, not a monologue. I don't want to be talking. I want to make sure that we have engagement in our discussions, in our coaching sessions. Very important that we're doing and our questions, again, are open-ended. And it really isn't personality dependent. Someone might say, well, I'm not really gregarious. I'm not really outspoken. Those people can be excellent, excellent business coaches. It is not dependent on your personality. And again, too much homework, you're trying too hard. I see this with business coaches. Wow, look at the check they're writing me every month. I've got to prove this. I've got to prove this is worth their investment. What is one idea worth? What is one idea worth? It can be catalytic, one idea. I'm going to give you one illustration. I was meeting with a gentleman who ran a $30 million company at the time. That company is now $80 million. And I had watched him interact with his leadership team for quite a while. And I went in one day. He paid me a lot of money. I went in one day and closed the door and I said, Scott, you have an anger problem. Your team is afraid and you manage based upon fear. He looked at me and said, Jim, we're done. He called me back an hour later, said, you know what, you're right, help me. And he related to someone recently. I didn't realize that this was still on his mind. This has been several years ago. He related that conversation changed his business and the way he looked at his leadership. We've got to be kind, but we've got to be courageous. I take very seriously business coaching. I love this. But I can't take a check and tell the business owner what he or she wants to hear. They pay employees to do that. Am I going to have the courage to actually do the right thing when it puts the relationship at risk? Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a word spoken in right circumstances, the wise King Solomon said. How wonderful it is to take a load off somebody, to say something. You know, are you an encourager as a business coach? It doesn't always have to be another problem. They don't necessarily need another problem. As a matter of fact, what they need are solutions. Part of being a business coach is being a cheerleader, an encourager, noticing what has gone well. If we're always pressing to find another problem to fix, it's really about us. Hey, what have you said to a business coach? You know, I was relating something that happened to me 35 years ago recently. I had had some personal issues in my life that were very embarrassing to me. And finally one day, I divulged this to a close friend, thinking that this was going to actually jeopardize my relationship with him. And his response to me, I can remember verbatim, 35 years ago, Jim, I have more respect for you now than ever. Those words of encouragement. As a child, you used to hear these expressions, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. There's never been a greater lie. Life and death is in the tongue. And as business coaches, we have a tremendous responsibility and privilege to encourage people along the way. It's not just about what they're doing wrong. It's about a kind, encouraging word when appropriate. Not patronizingly, not for ourselves, but actually at that moment, saying the appropriate thing. Now, let's move to another matter. We coach to our comforts, but you must have solutions outside your comfort zone. We just heard a presentation from Michael Anderson, who works with us at Broad Insights, about sales management. And my background was as a chief financial officer, in addition to being in a lot of other areas within companies in manufacturing, in HR, et cetera. But we can tend to coach only to our comforts. Someone once said, if my only tool is a hammer, every problem is a nail. And so at Broad Insights, one of the things that we determined to do was to, across the spectrum of organizational leaders' challenges, have people available to be able to help them meet their needs. We have someone that helps folks with estate planning. We have folks that work on our growth plans, finance, HR, et cetera. And of course, we call upon people who are experts, like attorneys, for example, to come help us. Who wants a business coach who says the answer, yes, I know about that? Saying that you don't know and you need to draw in expertise isn't a sign of your weakness, it's a sign of your strength. But we do coach to our comfort, so be careful as a business coach. If your background was in HR, not everything's an HR issue. If your background's in finance, not everything is about finance. Do you have the wisdom to understand the areas that you are maybe blind to or over-coaching in because that's your area of comfort, not necessarily the client's need? And as we've mentioned, custom solutions are necessary. You know, we have just put in place an interim COO in a manufacturing environment. We do fractional work. I'm actually the interim CEO for a couple of companies now. In some cases, we're doing emerging leaders. So we actually are doing what I would call soft skill coaching. So in each of these circumstances, let's figure out what the need is, as opposed to, I've got a solution, let's go find a problem. Let's figure out what the problem is, and can we find a solution for that? That's necessary. And creativity is also essential. One of the things that we did recently was a chief administrative officer role. There's a firm that is taking multifamily units, old apartment complexes, and they're renovating those. And actually Broad Insights has actually now invested in this client. But what we did was we said, look, you're in the business of construction. Let's put together a chief administrative officer role. Let's find an HR firm that we work with. Let's find a CPA firm that we work with. We brought those folks together. We rolled that into one package, and we said, for this fee per month, Broad Insights will not only coach you and help you strategically, we will provide the HR, payroll, et cetera, make sure you're compliant on all of the I-9s, for example, and all of your taxes and finance. We roll that into one package, and now Broad Insights actually manages the HR and CPA firm on their behalf, and they have a one invoice that they handle each month. So that was creative. We had not done that before, but that's a powerful thing that we've done for that particular client. Coaching tools. I would say you need to be selective, and these need to be few in number. There are a few things that you really need. A capturing of background. We heard something about that yesterday in Ed Allen's presentation. I'm going to take that away. The whole matter of assessments, very powerful to know what you're dealing with. How are people wired? Progress tracking. I wouldn't say this needs to be very complicated. What I typically do is an Excel spreadsheet. What have we decided? Who's responsible? And when is it due? When is the next milestone? We've got, for instance, a client right now, we've got 8 strategic initiatives we're working with. We've named an owner, and I've asked them every month when I come, a stoplight accounting. Is this green, yellow, or red? Who's your team member? Who's owning this? What's your next milestone? What do you need that you don't have? What obstacles have you run into? Do you need additional resources? We need to keep this very simple. I think you need something around budgetary tools, interviewing helps, I think are very important, and some strategic planning tools, for example. I would not have dozens and dozens and dozens of coaching tools. We need to keep this simple. I want to keep the ball moving for our clients. That would be my advice to you. And I think that, when we think about the way people are wired, it's very important. I don't play a lot of tennis. I can get the ball over the net with my backhand, but it's not very pretty. But helping people understand their disc or whatever behavioral profile you're looking at, and finding out what their forehand is, what their backhand is, and discussing the fact that they're wired differently is very, very powerful as a coach. So as we reflect on being a better coach, can I get better as a questioner, being more precise, more specific, more probing for their benefit? The other thing that we've done, as I've mentioned, is strategic alliances. We do have CPA firms we work with. We have financial planning firms we work with. We have HR firms that we work with. We have an engineering coaching that we work with that actually is not part of Broad Insights. Michael Anderson in our sales team. We work with Tim Morgan on growth. So we have these strategic alliances, partners. We have attorneys that we typically use. So I would suggest to you that as part of your coaching, think about how can you develop strategic alliances. And they don't have to be formal. They need to be trusting and make sure that you've had some experience with them, but allowing your clients to be able to look to you to provide that. We actually have commercial insurance companies that we use as well. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about keep learning. My wife and I were listening to a book on the way down. I think it's critical that we keep learning. This happened to be on Atomic Habits. Very intriguing and very powerful book that we listened to. You really want to keep sharp. You want to always be observing. You ought to always want to be learning. If you're going to be a subject matter expert, you owe it to your clients to be always learning and developing yourself. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Do you know the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Well, knowledge says that a tomato is not a vegetable, it's a fruit. Excellent to know that. Wisdom says, I don't put tomatoes in a fruit salad. How do we use our knowledge? And I'm afraid that some people want to, I've got a client like this. He's always got another book he's read. Yes, but how is that actually affecting your day-to-day leadership? Always got a new book recommendation, but somehow he's not converting that to becoming more effective as a leader. Someone said to me, a client, it's not what I don't know that hurts me. It's what I think I know that really hurts me when it's not true. So as a coach, be very careful about jumping to conclusions. Be very careful about presuming, oh, I've got this figured out now. This is not my first rodeo. Well, people are as complex and different as you can imagine. So be careful about jumping to a conclusion. One thing that we've done, consider surveying your clients. We surveyed for my dissertation 87 of our clients, and we asked them in 6 different areas, did they make progress or not? And by the way we did this, I think, was significant. Did you revert because of coaching? Did you stay the same? Did you get minimally better? If you get minimally better because of our coaching, we have failed you. I get minimally better just by getting older and making more mistakes. I didn't ask if you'd gotten moderately better. We said, did you get significantly or radically better in these 6 areas? Employee engagement, which is more measurable. You can do a survey before and after. Customer satisfaction. financial results, and then some that are a little more difficult, that leadership effectiveness, short-term decision making, and strategic clarity. That's what we chose to measure. And at 99% confidence, we showed progress in 5 of these 6 areas. One of the areas we did not show that level of confidence in areas, and that was in the area of financial results. So that was a takeaway for us, that maybe we weren't explicitly enough talking about that, or in fact, maybe we weren't focusing on that enough. But here were the 2 questions I thought were even more important. Is coaching actually worth it? Is there a return on investment? And of the 87 clients that we surveyed, only 2 did not believe it was a positive investment. And what was interesting was, included in the 87 people that we surveyed, some of those, and we didn't filter them out, were people that were told you will be coached within an organization. And then we asked the question, would you recommend it? You all are familiar with a Net Promoter Score. Basically, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 9 or a 10 is a promoter, 6 and below is a detractor, 7 and 8 you throw out. And Broad Insights had a double the industry average in Net Promoter Score. Our score was 56, as I recall, on a scale of between a negative 100 and a positive 100. I would recommend you do that somehow with your clients so that you can provide that to other people who are wondering whether or not this is actually worth it. So again, coaching isn't about talking, it's about listening. Now, we are not of the belief that we never have an opinion, and we need to share it. There's timing, there's cadence, there's appropriate amount of this. The idea that says, well, I've got 35 years experience and, well, I can't actually share with you what I think because I need to draw it out of you only, we think is really not the right approach. There is a wonderful balance that says, look, they are investing in themselves through hiring a business coach or a business coaching firm. We certainly ought to have something to say, but let's say it at the right time. Complicated family issues. Had a situation at a farm up in the Midwest. I walked in one day on a Thursday at lunch and they had barbecue. I'd never met these people before. I went up at my own expense and I said, let's get together and talk. There were supposed to be 7 people there. I walked in, I said, hey, is everybody here? No, we got a couple people waiting. They're not here yet. Okay, fine. Let's have some barbecue. So we ate, made sure everybody's there, and I said, why am I here? They talked for about 30 minutes. I said, is there any tension in the room? That got quite a bit of reaction and a long conversation. And then I said, this is my 3rd and final question. If you were to hire me in 1 year, what would success look like? We wrote that all down on the whiteboard. They had each individually answered that, and we compiled those. I said, tell you what we'll do. Why don't I take an hour with each one of you between today, now, and tomorrow at lunch, and we'll come back tomorrow at lunch and decide whether we go forward or not. It's really strange because I got to lunch the second day, and I realized I knew more what everybody else at that table was thinking about than any of them. They had divulged to me that quickly what was going on. And my assessment was, I didn't share that with them, my assessment was that there was an incredible feeling of inequity among everybody. Everybody had gotten the short straw. And actually what had happened was, 30 years prior, 2 brothers who had inherited a farm from their father had begun to, as they purchased more farmland, they would buy it, and the next child to come available would get that next piece of parcel. So, son A would get a 300-acre piece of property. 5 years later was 100 piece of, so that son B would get 100 acres. And then son C got 400 acres. And the next son got 50 acres because that was the parcel. And some had barns, and some had houses, and some had a lot of barns. And by the way, to sort of compensate for that, they had also given away different portions of equity based upon whether children had gone off to college or not, how many years they had been in the farm, etc. And everybody had a story that they could point out to you how they had sacrificed more than their siblings and their cousins, by the way, and therefore it was inequitable. And so the first thing I said to them was, what we need to do is we need to lay out all the assets of the farms, and we need to divide these up equitably in some way. And then you need to choose your parcel, if you wish, of your home place out of your equity, etc. They never would do that. We made progress in a lot of ways, but they never got the fundamental issue of inequity fixed. There are some things we cannot fix as business coaches. Very, very complicated, a Gordian knot. Execution beats ideation. The fact that you've got great ideas does not make you special. Can we get it done? Met with a client recently, and they said, we want you to help us do a strategic plan. And I said, how long have you been doing strategic planning? Oh, this is like our 8th year. We do this systematically. What has gotten done? Very quiet. I said, so here's what we're going to do. You know what? We're not going to have to get this perfect. We got together as a group. I said, here's 8 things we ought to be working on. And that's what we're doing. Matter of fact, we're going up next month and taking a look at that. I don't have to have the perfect strategy. I need to just get better. We can tweak as we go along. We can sit in a conference room and work on our vision and mission statements. We can put them on our wall and they don't make any difference. What value was that? Wordsmithing new ideas. Get it done. Perfection is the enemy of progress. I just want to get 5% better. The cumulative effect of getting 5% better is enormous. But if I wait and try to get the perfect strategy, I may not make any progress. You know, you've gone to the ophthalmologist and you've had your eyes examined. Can you imagine if you were 2,400 in your left eye and you had some astigmatism and you were given prescription glasses, and the only problem was they gave you the exact prescription, but it was on the wrong eye? We've got to be very careful that our diagnosis is correct, but also our coaching response is optimal. I remember getting knee surgery a few years ago, and one of the things they did before I got sedated was they checked to make sure. Now, we are working on the left knee today, right? Okay? Why would they ask that? Because there have been situations where we understand perfectly what the problem is, but we're operating on the wrong limb. That's one thing we need to be very careful about as coaches. All right, so now we've got the next session, which is lessons from clients. And these will be varied here. I have a lot of clients tell me, look, I hate confrontation. And my response to that is, you're claiming to be a human being. That means nothing to me that you hate confrontation. If you don't hate confrontation, I'm going to question a lot of things about you. Everybody I know that is wise doesn't wade into confrontation for confrontation's sake. But what if we changed one word? What if we called it restoration in your organization? I must have a conversation. There is this artificial peace within my clients where people are not talking with one another, they don't like each other, they don't trust each other, but they don't want to have a blow up. And we all get that. We have all said things we regret. We've all overreacted. I mean, look, if you compare the number of times that I have regretted not saying something versus the number of times I've regretted saying something, there's no comparison. I've often said things I wish I could take back because we've reacted, but we've not calmly looked at a situation. Wait a minute, I'm working with this person. I need to restore this person back to good graces, to good performance, to good relationships. I've got to have this conversation. If I truly care about this person in my organization, I can't afford not to have this conversation. It's not confrontation. It's restoration. Very important nuance. I see this with my clients. We've got a client right now, and one of the kindest human beings you'll ever meet. He inherited about a $30 million business from his parents, and he wants to be popular. He wants to be liked. And it has just about bankrupted his business. Well-meaning, caring. He's got a team around him that have been with him for a long time. Super loyal. Who wouldn't be? But this is something that must be challenged for your clients. Do you have a rigorous evaluation process? Do you have an evaluation process at all? Do people know explicitly what their goals are? It's not enough just for people to know that you care about them. That's wonderful. Don't throw that away, but it doesn't mean you can't have both. Rigor, discipline, performance, and this sense of family, which is wonderful if you can have it. Here's another thing that we see with clients. Meetings are wasted opportunities that can be recaptured with simple changes. Hey, how about this? How about starting a meeting with, what's our agenda? What would success look like? Who's going to take notes? Do we have a master action list that says, what have we decided, who's responsible, and when is the next feedback loop? Sometimes meetings can be informational only, and that's fine, but let's state them as such. Sometimes they're decisional meetings, sometimes they're progress meetings, sometimes they're informational meetings. An incredible amount of time is wasted in our client meetings until we get in and begin to coach them how to use these meeting times. I remember going to a client, and one of the things that this was also down south, and this was a company in deep trouble. We don't often get companies like this, but this was a turnaround. And I went into a meeting, and every other Friday morning they had Cracker Barrel breakfast together. This was a company that was losing millions of dollars. And they were more interested in whether I wanted the sugar-free syrup or the regular syrup for my pancakes than they were about turning the business around. All in the name of camaraderie. This is the kind of thing you find. That's an egregious example, but it's a real example that I've experienced. One of the things that we do is we do surveys. Would you rather not know than actually be faced with the truth? I had a client one time. We did an employee engagement survey. And I walked into his office after I'd given him the results to his management team, and he says to me, Jim, I'll tell you one thing about your survey. I said, what's that? I will never do another one. He didn't like what he saw. He called me back 24 hours later and he says, you know what? I can't run from the truth. And now systematically every year he does this survey and can't wait for the results. And we have seen incredible increases in employee engagement. Matter of fact, we've made several changes to the company. Let me give you one, for instance. Now, this man was a very kind, successful, compassionate leader. But he wasn't a people person. And he actually thought getting out and glad-handing people, slapping them on the back was so fake and so phony that he just didn't do it. And he had been a CFO before he took over this company. And so he stayed in his office and he worked on his spreadsheets because that's the way he added value to the business. And the survey came back and said the CEO is cold, he doesn't care, he never talks with us, we're just numbers to him. Well, I happen to know, in spite of my advice to the contrary, that this was actually a very caring man and had helped some people personally in the company financially when they were in trouble. I'm not recommending that, but that was the sort of person he was. Well, I looked at him, I said, look, so one of the worst things on the survey was communication. I said, here's what we ought to do. You don't need to go out and glad hand people. Twice a month, he had about 80 people in his company. Let's take 30 minutes in the morning meeting. You stand up and give people an update on the business and ask if they have any questions. The survey changed. You don't have to put them so far out of their comfort zone, but finding out, if I know what my employees really think, and I know what my customers really think, and I know what my financials really tell me, I know about my business. So surveys are a powerful thing that we've done with clients. What's the number one lesson I've learned in over 10,000 hours of coaching? What's the number one lesson? Here's the number one lesson I've learned. People love to talk about people. They will not talk to people. If we can get people together and talk to one another and not about one another, very, very powerful. And when we get in the room as a coach, we can change that dynamic. Not accusatorily, but in a way that facilitates. Gossip is cancerous. There's another proverb from the wise man Solomon. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. I remember we were in a situation where I'm part of a nonprofit organization, and there was somebody that had left that organization, and they were on Facebook being very negative about the organization. And the board was sitting around saying, what are we going to do? It looks like we're agreeing with this person. If we don't say anything, we need to defend this organization. This isn't true. And I quoted this verse. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And it went away. You don't have to have the last word. Here's another thing we see with clients. Why? They're wringing their hands over the number of people that exit their organization. I don't know why we're losing all these people. They're watching the wrong door. You fix this when people are coming into your organization, not when they're leaving. Do our clients have a systemic, scientific hiring process? Do our interviews actually get to the heart of things? Are we haphazard? Are we emotional? Or are we systematic in our hiring? Everyone wants to talk about why is everyone leaving, and I want to know, are we certain that we're hiring the right people? You can't be certain, but you can certainly improve your odds. This is something we've seen from our clients. You know, kindness and candor. These are not opposites, they're friends. We're afraid being honest with people is going to, that being honest with people is going to jeopardize our relationship. Actually, the person who is rebuked often respects that person more than one who simply flatters. You can be kind and dead honest. You don't do it in emotion. You don't do it in reaction. You do it in a measured way. You ask a lot of questions. But coaching and what we see with our clients, convince your client to have kind and candid conversations. Evaluations are not the time for surprises. An evaluation is simply a accumulation of the already known conversations that have occurred throughout that year. Know your numbers. So many clients are so embarrassed that they actually don't understand the difference and how an income statement ties to a balance sheet and how cash is different than profit and what the difference is between profit and contribution margin. And you know, we work with CPA firms. I'm a certified management accountant, was a CFO, but I often wind up translating for my clients these books. You ought to be able to do that as a coach, and your client needs to know their numbers. I don't know if you've ever noticed this on your car, but how many pieces of information that you've got immediately in front of you. My car will tell me how many pounds of air pressure in each tire. I know what radio station I'm listening to. I know how much gas I've got. I know my oil pressure. I know my kilometers per hour, my miles per hour, my RPMs, my trip set, my odometer, what the speed limit is. My GPS is there. It's amazing what I have at my fingertips, whether I'm on cruise control or not, what that speed is set for. You ought to work on a dashboard. As a matter of fact, this morning, I got from a client a dashboard that I've been asking for. And one of the things that we've done is the very act of putting a number as a goal is so powerful. One of my clients, I said, look, this year we're going to be at $160,000 a day in sales. $40 million company. They've never had that put in front of them. You know what we are year to date? We're at about $155,000. The very act of holding something up is huge. Can you help your client get a dashboard that's meaningful, that's not overwhelming, and it can change? But metrics are a very powerful way to guide the business. Bonus plans. Here's another mistake we see. And Joseph and I have talked about what we would call Santa Claus bonuses at the end of the year. If your client has a bonus plan, great. But if the conclusion at the end of the year is, wow, I work for a wonderful human being, that's not a good bonus plan. What behaviors are they rewarding? What results is my bonus plan actually rewarding? What needs to be repeated in the upcoming time period? Bonus plans are not about, I'm generous, I care about you. That's nice as part of the message, but the major message ought to be, this is what we're rewarding, and this is how you repeat it. You know what the greatest management principle in the world is? The greatest management principle in the world is what gets rewarded gets done. What are you rewarding? We get certain behaviors and we wonder why, because we're rewarding those behaviors. We intended to reward something else. Everybody in the same room at the same time hearing the same thing. Went into a company in South Carolina. This was about a $15 million company. There were very few people in the company. And I did what I always do. I just kind of wander about the first couple of sessions. I began talking to people. And I talked to the person in charge of logistics and shipping, talked to the person in charge of the plant, talked to somebody in charge of quality. And I realized in a very small company, these people weren't talking to each other. So what did I do? We tried to get creative. I said, look, I'm going to be here every Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and I'm going to facilitate a team meeting. So walked in, I put in an Excel spreadsheet, put it on the thing. All right, let's begin talking about this. Okay, how many customer failures have we had? How many changeovers did we have in our manufacturing facility? Well, how many forklifts accidents do we have? How many forklifts do we have now? Whatever I heard them talking about, we began to track. Very cold at the beginning. They never went to meetings. They did their own thing. I don't know how they functioned. But the very fact that we coalesced everybody in the same room and began to talk once a week about what our common goals were, very powerful. Don't have side conversations alone. Everyone in the same room at the same time hearing the same thing. Very powerful way to move your clients forward. Here's an interesting graph. This was a recent nonprofit that I did, and I believe there were 30 people in the organization. And this is a DISC assessment, of course, and it noticed the number of people that had similar profiles. 83% of the people had profiles that were very similar, very high on S. And so that led to a very powerful discussion about do we need to hire differently? Do we need to have different sensitivities in meetings, et cetera? And so we came to some conclusions. Realize, of course, that knowing people's wiring as part of what you initially do is very, very powerful. And I often think about sunglasses, about when I talk about DISC. If I wear blue sunglasses, and my whole life I've worn blue tinted sunglasses, the world is obviously blue. Until I meet somebody that has green tinted sunglasses. And now I've got an opportunity to either say they're stupid, they're wrong, or hey, let me consider the way they see the world. That's very powerful. I remember living in France. And if you're living in France looking for America, you're not going to be very happy. When we went to France, you had a choice to go in the cereal aisle between cornflakes or cornflakes. And I remember trying to find peanut butter in France. Well, that's very, very difficult to do. And I remember one time my kids saying, Dad, why do they do that like that? That's really stupid. And I said, it's not stupid. It's different. And if we can embrace true diversity of views and not fight that, but celebrate it, our teams will be stronger. And I see clients really, really needing that and needing that to be discussed. You know, some leaders explode, and that's not okay. You know, if I drop a bomb in this room, there will be lifelong consequences to that. It only lasted for a second. I've had clients, big clients, that I have forced them to apologize to people. It is not okay because you're the boss to throw an emotional temper tantrum. That is not okay. And as a coach, that needs to be challenged. There's a wise way of doing that. There's a way that isn't embarrassing, that isn't tit for tat, but we need the courage to hold a mirror up to our clients. It's not okay just because they're the owner and our client. You know, and what happens is, I remember being in Georgia. Cindy and I really enjoy these rails to trails. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there's 24,000 miles of former railroad right-of-way that has been converted to bike and walking trails around the country. Love that. There's one that goes from Atlanta, Georgia to Anniston, Alabama. It's 100 miles. So Cindy and I took that trail and we spent the night at a bed and breakfast one night. And there was still some train tracks near there, and it was very hard to sleep. And I realized something the next morning. You know what? If I lived here, I'd have gotten used to that. Your clients have gotten used to the way they are, and that's normal, and they think that's okay. And we have a role to play. So, you know what? That's the way you've been doing it. That doesn't mean that's acceptable or optimal. And three of the hardest words for anybody to say is, I was wrong. I wrote a personal note to two of my clients recently. I was in a meeting and I had done exactly what I had coached them not to do. I wrote a handwritten note, said I was wrong. I didn't excuse it. I didn't explain it. I said to one, I failed you today. Your clients may need to be challenged in that way. I've seen that. And as Joseph has pointed out in a recent blog post on our site, in matters of conflict, lead with questions. Questions open people up. Accusations close people down. You're in a tense situation. Imagine a situation with your clients, either you or among those team members. Let's have a conversation. Hey, what is your understanding of how we got to where we are today, for example? Marketing. I keep seeing this with my clients. There's a lot of wasted money in marketing. You need to manage this carefully. Challenge the ROI. Do pilot projects. I am a strong believer in incrementalism. Let's see if this works, and then let's go further. This is a client mistake I have seen again and again. Here's another example, MBWA, management by wandering about. Get out of your office. Get off your spreadsheets. Get out and talk to your people. There's always more administrative work to do. And here clearly is the toughest area in my mind to make change. I was mentioning earlier about a client, and you know, I can fix your budget this year. I can fix your organization. Growth is a long-term process often. One of my clients has got a 4-year stagnation. Can you imagine a top-line stagnation in this economy? And I'm going to come in as a client or as a coach and fix that stagnation issue? That isn't going to happen nearly as quickly as putting financial discipline in place. Here's something we do. We have one of our coaches that works with Patrick Lencioni's group. Rob has helped us with this. And so this whole matter of team building, these are things that we have done for some of our clients. Building trust, having off-site meetings. This is something that could be really fundamental for some of your clients. We get so enamored with strategy, but without proper tactics, day to day, one foot in front of another, your strategies are going to fail. I see this with clients. Enamored with the exciting, enamored with the the intellectual stimulating. Hey, let's get up today and let's get better today. Look, here's the big four we always talk about. They're simple, but they're not easy. Engage my employees, satisfy my customers, optimize my resources, and let's make sure we're seizing the right and only the right opportunities. Hey, that isn't easy, but it's relatively simple. You run your organization like this, these are the areas you need to focus on. Thank you very much.